Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am back and I'm very excited to be back. I've missed you. Today I'm bringing you a bit of a different tutorial. Up until this point, all of the videos on my channel have been crochet tutorials. However, I study fashion design and so a lot of different skills go into that, and one of them is sewing. So I've been sewing a lot this summer, and this is one project that I have made, and I thought that I would make a little tutorial for you guys, especially if you are a beginner or if you would like to learn to sew. I think this project is great because there's not a lot of sewing required, and the sewing that we do is fairly simple. I originally saw a post of a pillow like this on Pinterest. Here is the original post. This is not my original design whatsoever. However, this is just the process that I took to create my pillowcase. The materials you will need are listed on the screen. So you will need a sewing machine. An overlocker is optional, and I will talk a bit about the different ways that you can finish your raw edges once we reach that point. So if you don't have an overlocker, don't worry. You will need a button-up shirt that is big enough to fit the pillow that you want to make the pillowcase for. You will need an iron, pins or clips, fabric scissors. Thread snippers are optional. You could just use your fabric scissors to cut the threads. A fabric pencil. A pattern master is optional. If you don't have that, you could just use a ruler, a measuring tape, and then a sewing gauge. The sewing gauge is optional. I just use mine to measure my seams. Before we can start sewing, we need to prepare our fabric. My shirt is deconstructed, so I'm ironing the front and the back panel. However, if your shirt is fully intact, iron it as it is, and we will be cutting into it later. You do not need to take apart your shirt. The reason why mine is deconstructed is because it was given to me this way by a friend to repurpose. Once we have prepared our fabric, we can now gather the width and length of our pillow that we want to make the pillowcase for. The length of my pillow is 53 centimeters and the width of my pillow is 31 centimeters for reference. Now that we have these measurements, we can then move them onto our fabric to create the pattern. Because my shirt is deconstructed, the way that I am doing the next few steps may be a bit different to the way that you'll be doing them. So here I'm including this little segment to clarify how I want you to go about marking your measurements and then cutting your shirt. So if your shirt is fully intact, specifically at the side seams, you are just going to lay your shirt down flat and mark your measurements on the top of the shirt, so on the front panels. And then when it comes to cutting your shirt, you will cut through both the top, which is the front of the shirt, and the back of the shirt. However, if you do want to take apart your shirt, that is absolutely okay. There's nothing stopping you. However, doing it this way will save you some time and some sewing. So you are going to lay down your tape measure and mark the very beginning. And then go down to the width measurement that you've recorded plus 2 centimeters. So my width is 31 centimeters and I'm adding 2 centimeters for seam allowance. This is a crucial step. If you do not add seam allowance, once we sew the pillowcase, it will not fit your pillow. You can add however much seam allowance you would like. I have done 1 centimeter and I would say that 1 centimeter is the absolute minimum. So after marking the beginning and end of my width, I'm using my pattern master to connect the lines. Now obviously you guys unfortunately cannot see the lines because I didn't have any fabric pencils or markers that would show up on camera. But once you've marked your width, we can now move on to marking the length. As I mentioned before, my length is 53 centimeters. However, we need to add seam allowance. So my new length is going to be 55 centimeters. So add 2 centimeters to whatever your length is. And once you've drawn this line, you are then going to repeat the same thing to the remaining 2 lines, which will join your pillowcase pattern together. Once you've done this, you can then get cutting. So to cut your pattern out, you are going to follow the lines that you have drawn. I do apologize that you guys cannot see the lines. The pattern makes it quite difficult and I didn't have a marker that would actually make the lines visible. However, I hope my explanation is clear enough. If you have any questions, make sure to comment them below. Now, if your shirt was fully intact and if you drew your measurements and cut your fabric the way that I had mentioned in that little segment, your side seams should be connected right now, and the only gaps that you should have are at the top and the bottom. For me, because my shirt is deconstructed, I am going to be laying the first piece of fabric that I cut on top of the front panel, and I will be using it as a pattern piece to cut out the front panel, and then I will later be connecting it at the side seams. So here are my cut fabric pieces. I have a back panel and I have a front panel. I am going to lay these right sides together so that we have the wrong sides facing out. Taking your pins or clips, you are then going to clip all around the open spaces. Once you reach the point where the buttons are, so the placket, make sure that these are aligned nicely together because this will be functional later on. After you have pinned and clipped all the way around, we can then start to sew. You will need to sew your seams together at a 1 centimeter seam allowance. I am starting by sewing the length, and then I will go down and sew the width, which would be the sides. If you do have side seams, then you won't need to do that because they are already connected. So you would just need to sew the top and the bottom together to close the openings. Once you reach the placket where the buttons are, stop and take a look as to where your first button is, because the last thing you want is to accidentally sew over a button. That will absolutely break your needle and that is very dangerous. So just take a look to make sure that it's not in the way, and then if it is, you can remove that button. So here I've just double checked and I'm aligning the placket, making sure that it is as neat as can be. And I will continue sewing at a 1 centimeter seam allowance until I reach the end. As I am approaching the end, I will just make sure that my ends are aligned. And I will stop 1 centimeter from the end. And to know that you have stopped 1 centimeter from the end, you will make sure that your needle is inside of your work, and then you will pivot your work. So when your needle is inside, it allows you to move the fabric without actually moving anything out of place, if that makes sense. Once you have pivoted, you can then continue sewing down at a 1 centimeter seam allowance, and this will sew our side, so the width of the pillowcase together. If your sides are already joined together from the actual shirt from when you were cutting, then you won't need to do this and you can just fasten off by back tacking and clipping your thread. Don't forget to back tack at the beginning of your sewing and then at the end. You will need to pivot when you reach the corners. So once you've sewn down a seam, you will then pivot your work and then sew the other until you reach the end. This is what my work looks like so far. The pillow is almost complete. We just need to finish off our raw edges. The way that I'm doing this is I'm using an overlocker. If you do not have an overlocker, you can alternatively finish off your raw edges using the zigzag stitch on your sewing machine, and you would proceed to finish all of your raw edges this way. In the description, I have included a tutorial which shows you exactly how to finish your raw edges using a zigzag stitch. So do check that out if you are unsure of how to do so. It's very detailed, so it should help you do that. Here are what my overlocked edges look like. Very neat. And I will be showing you how to tuck away the overlocker tails. So to do this, you will need a tapestry needle and you will need to thread the overlocker tail through the eye of the needle. Then you will be poking your needle through the little V's at the top, if you can see. And I am poking it through as many as I can. Once you've done that, you can then push your needle all the way through, pulling the thread tail of the overlocker through the little V's. Like so. And this is how you securely tuck away your overlocker threads. Then you can just take your thread snippers or scissors and snip off the excess. I have done this to all of my edges after overlocking, and that is the pillowcase complete. Once you have finished off all of your raw edges, you can then flip your pillowcase right sides out. Here I am taking my sewing gauge, which has a collar point at the very tip, and I'm using it to poke out the corners of the pillowcase. You do not need a sewing gauge, you could just use anything that has a little bit of a point to poke out the corners and make them nice and crisp. This is what my lovely pointy corner looks like, and you are going to repeat this for the remaining 3 corners. Once you have done that and you have unbuttoned the buttons on the placket, your pillowcase is complete and you can put your pillow inside. What I loved about this pillow style was the fact that the shirt was actually functional and it still retained somewhat of its purpose, that you could use the opening of the shirt as the opening for the pillow to go through. I love that. I just think this is so creative and I love my pillow. This is so fun. You can do this for so many different shirts and create so many cool new pillowcases with fun patterns on them. I will definitely be making another one. But yeah, here's the completed pillow. It's the cutest thing in the world. I love it. Yeah, here's my pillow and here is me going to sleep. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to today's video. It's a bit of a different one, but it was very fun to film. Let me know if you guys would like any more sewing tutorials. I have a few more projects that I've been working on that I would love for you guys to see. Thank you all for your continued support. It means so much to me. There is 13,000 of you here now, which that's a lot of people. I never thought that I would have this many of you watching my videos, but I truly do appreciate it and I love you all. My social medias are in the description if you want to connect with me there. I'm doing my best to get back into the swing of things and, try and be a bit more active, so bear with me. But yeah, if you have any questions, leave them in the description or you can message me on my socials. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye.